Hello, everybody. This is Alan Gallegos with the Boise Beat. Today, we're going to be discussing the playoff picture, Week 16, how it played out, and what we expect to happen in Week 17. Let's go.
Hey, what's going on? What's going on? Thank you for having me.
Yes, sir. How you doing?
Man, I'm blessed, man. Blessed. Look forward to talking about a little football today.
Yes, sir. We got a lot to talk about. Week 16, we just got through it. A bit of a crazy week. A few upsets.
Couple upsets.
A few Super Bowl previews, possibly.
That too.
So let's just jump into that. We got Ravens, 49ers, Cowboys, Dolphins. What'd you see out of those? What'd you like?
Let's start Cowboys Dolphins because Ravens 49ers was the nightcap game. Cowboys Dolphins. I feel like it was a pretty evenly matched game. Both quarterbacks came in, played solid games. Ultimately, the determining factor was the early turnover on the first drive. Don't know exactly what happened there. Whenever they showed the replay, it looks like the running back had a hard time with the exchange, caused a fumble. And that really, you hand the ball over to the other team at the 1 yard line when you were going to go in and potentially score 7, worst case scenario 3, and you see the score play out 22-20. I think that was a huge momentum shift, even though it was in the very first quarter on the first drive. What did you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Costly turnovers, especially early on in the game, can decide games like that between two highly skilled teams. I mean, you look at it, that's two of the highest scoring offenses in the league.
Yes.
And games like that, you need all the points you can get, because you're going to need them later on. You look at the high level teams like the Niners, for example, who have been just killing it all year. They're a team that they impose their will early and they score on you early and make you feel like you're out of it right away. And so those early points really can determine a game like that.
Yeah, no, it was definitely if I'm not mistaken, it's the number 1 and 2 ranked offenses in the league. Interestingly enough, the Dolphins defensively have had a pretty drastic swing in how they've been playing since they got Jalen Ramsey back. All-pro corner, Super Bowl champ. You add him to the formula of what they're trying to do with Vic Fangio as their defensive coordinator. And for some reason, Dak seems to have a hard time against Vic Fangio. We actually saw that with the Broncos, if I'm not mistaken, maybe 2 years ago or a year ago when he was their coach. So I think he was the defensive coordinator.
Yes.
I felt like Tua played a very consistent game. There wasn't a ton of huge plays. I think I kind of expected that from both teams because both teams defensively don't give up a lot of big plays. Tyreek Hill was actually quiet until the fourth quarter. He finished with, if I'm not mistaken, 9 catches, just under 100 yards. And interestingly enough, CeeDee Lamb on the other side had a huge first quarter, went quiet second and third quarter. Don't know what happened there. Maybe it was a defensive adjustment, but then stepped it up again in the fourth. So, it came down to one team making a stop, and the Cowboys couldn't make a stop on that last drive. What did you think of their strategy defensively? Because I have kind of a different perspective on this, but I would like to hear kind of what you thought at the end of the game.
A lot of the strategy, everybody hears about Dak and everybody's wanting to put pressure on Dak. So that's always the first thing that you're trying to do. And then obviously bend, don't break. Yeah. They're an explosive offense, obviously top 2. And so, really limiting their playmakers like Tony Pollard and CeeDee Lamb, and, especially buckle up come red zone time, because there's going to be those possessions where they're going to get deep in the red zone. So it's really bend, don't break. Give up field goals, but not touchdowns. And you see they did a very good job of that. Field goals.
It was interesting the last drive. So the critique, I think, unfair if you look at Dak's career overall, but the critique has been him being able to drive the team down and take a lead late in the game. Mm-hmm. And he did a phenomenal drive, doing a great job of connecting with his receivers, connecting with Brandon Cooks, who seems to have really become their second, third option as the year has gone along, and took the lead. And it was interesting. I thought that watching the Cowboys defense, when the Miami Dolphins came across the midfield line, when they got past the 50, I felt like if they were going to do anything or if they were going to gamble at any point, they should have done it then, because the Dolphins just nickeled and dimed them right down the field, and you only got 3 timeouts. So it's not like they were throwing the ball to the boundaries. They were putting everything infield, getting down and forcing the Cowboys to burn timeout. So defensively, I felt like, bring a blitz. If they burn you, at least you get the ball back, right? Mm-hmm. At least you get an opportunity to go and score. Sure. But yeah, it was a very good game. This is the first win the Dolphins have had against a winning team. So I'm sure that gives them a certain level of confidence. But however, that was at home. So, yes, it was a weird dynamic. All week, one team can't win on the road. One team can't beat a good team. It's all just talking points. But the Dolphins squeaked it out, and they're a very solid team. I think they can make a good run this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And the goal at this point of the season is just to get hot at the right time. And who knows, you make a run, you could do it. You look at teams like the Giants in years past, weren't the prettiest football team, but you get hot at the right time and you end up beating Tom Brady in the Super Bowl twice. It's possible.
Don't remind me. Eli Manning getting very, I shouldn't say lucky, because there's no luck necessarily in winning a Super Bowl. But you're right. It's about clicking at the right time. And styles make fights, right? And we're talking about it in any sport. And I think that actually speaks to the next game we're going to touch base on here in a minute, really. In terms of the stylistic differences and how those teams played this past week.
Yeah, for sure. And you look at a team like the Niners, who's been very hot as of late, Baltimore as well, two of really the best overall good-looking teams as the season has progressed. And you see a team like the Niners in a game like this, they're not a team to turn the ball over, as we mentioned earlier. They're a team that protects the football. They make very minimal mistakes, and because they're very well disciplined, well coached. So a game like this where Brock Purdy throwing 4 interceptions, very unlike the San Francisco 49ers.
What did you think of the way that the game played out with the turnovers? As you mentioned, Brock Purdy uncharacteristically threw those interceptions. It's not something that we've seen him do on a consistent basis. And then the games that the Niners lost, fair or unfair, as far as the critique of why they lost those games, they did have players out, primarily Trent Williams, Deebo Samuel, and that does change the dynamics of their offense. So for him to throw 4 interceptions, it was actually pretty shocking. I didn't know that he would go through the game without a turnover, but 4 told me that from my perspective, he was certainly rattled. His confidence was shook. And I think it was smart for them to pull him out when the game got out of hand, to live to fight another day, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I don't think enough people are giving credit to this Ravens defense for the job they've done all year and the game plan they put together this week. Because, a lot of the year, the 49ers lose a game or two and everybody's ready to hop on Brock Purdy and say, he's a system quarterback and whatnot. But I think he's shown a lot of growth throughout the year to prove the naysayers wrong. And I think a lot of what happened this last week was more so a game plan from the Ravens and also the Niners stylistically getting away from what they do best. And what they do best is run the ball.
Yes.
And when they run the ball, that's the reason they've been able to protect quarterbacks like Purdy and Garoppolo in the past, And it makes the game so much easier for them when you can run the ball and you can balance that offense and introduce the play action pass, get the linebackers moved in, get them to respect the run game and throw over the top of them. Unfortunately, you see they got away from it, and it was working so well, handing the ball off to McCaffrey. And, sometimes the Niners, well, they never really do that. They're very consistent with running that football, and it just looked like they just didn't do it enough to really help Purdy, I think, with the play calls.
I agree. I think the critique that I've heard of Kyle Shanahan is he can get a little cute with the play calling. I think in a matchup with Baltimore, you have to understand the makeup and the characteristics of the team. Baltimore, since Ray Lewis was there, has always been very defense driven, very tough minded, very disciplined. Harbaugh has those boys playing really good ball. And right now they're looking like the best team in the AFC. So coming into this matchup, I expected with Christian McCaffrey having an MVP type season for him to get more touches. I expected more play action. I think from the interceptions that I saw, a couple of them were, tip pass here, tip pass there. But I saw a couple where I don't think Brock was seeing the field. And if you look at statistics, and it actually speaks to how explosive of a team the 49ers are, he ranks in the bottom fourth. I think he's like 26th, 27th in actual pass attempts. So that tells you they do commit to running the ball, but he has the highest attempt per pass. I think he's just under 10 yards an attempt. So it shows that when they pass the ball, they're very explosive. I think that sometimes teams want to make a statement rather than sticking to what's gotten them there. And I think if they would have ran the ball some more, the game might have been tighter. But just watching how it played out, Baltimore was the better team that night. And I don't want to keep talking about the 49ers too much because that kind of discredits the Ravens. What did you think of the Ravens game plan, Lamar Jackson's game, and overall where they're at as a team right now?
No, overall, I don't think they've been given near the credit that they deserve for the football that they've been playing throughout the year. I mean, you look at a lot of teams that have been good and, a lot of inconsistencies, though, throughout the league. And not enough people are giving credit to the Ravens for how consistent they've been playing throughout the year. And they still haven't really entered that chat yet until this week about being a top NFL team. And this win was huge for them to do it the way they did against a great football team like the 49ers, who has been hyped as the early favorites to win the Super Bowl. And definitely in a year with a question mark around MVP, no quarterbacks really standing out to take that. It's right now Lamar Jackson's award to lose. Yeah. They're playing really good football right now.
I agree. I feel like they've kind of flown under the radar. But it's crazy because if you look at the division they're in, even with the Steelers being down, not having consistent quarterback play, the Browns going through 3 or 4 different quarterbacks to get to where they're at, and even the Bengals losing – sorry, I'm drawing a blank right now.
Joe Burrow.
Joe Burrow. Wow, how could I forget Joe Burrow? Losing Joe Burrow.
They're cool.
And going with Browning and them still winning games. That's the best division in football right now. And the Ravens have dominated that division. For whatever reason, I think, like you said, the Niners have been very dominant in their wins. The couple of losses they had, I guess you could chalk it up to injuries. But I don't necessarily believe that that's fair because a lot of teams have had injuries. If you look at some of the teams that lost some games that they probably shouldn't have, they had injuries to some of their best players. And I think when you talk about the NFL, they say any given Sunday for a reason, right?
Absolutely.
Because every player, all the players are super talented, and all it takes is an off day and a great game plan from the other team, and you take an L. So, like you said, Lamar Jackson, he's not putting up the numbers he put up in his MVP year, but I think the biggest difference I'm seeing is he's seeing the field better. He's picking and choosing when he takes off. but he's still very dominant, and he controls a game like no other quarterback in the league can, because you have to very much game plan. You can't run too much man, because if you turn your back, he's out of there.
Yeah.
If you run zone, his receivers are very quick, very decisive route runners, and Zay Jones Zay Flowers and Odell Beckham and Bateman. So they're a well-built team. Right now, do I see anyone in the AFC giving them a fit? No, especially if they have to go through Baltimore. So this was certainly a Super Bowl preview. The 49ers, they need to pick up their britches and get on to the next game. They're still in position for that number 1 seed. And I think it was just an off game in some aspects, but they got punched in the mouth. I think they've been bullying teams all year, and this team was a bully. The saying, bullies don't like bullies. So I think Baltimore is on the right track to make a Super Bowl run.
Yeah, they've definitely proven themselves this last week. And I don't think it's also fair to say that the Niners are pretenders. They've been exposed. A lot of people are trying to say that recently. It's just one of those games where you learn. You're going to have to. You get punched in the mouth sometimes. And fortunate for them, it happened now rather than in the playoffs.
100%.
So they can keep their heads on a swivel. But
yes,
you mentioned earlier quarterback injuries, which has been huge this year. And I can even go down the list. You got week 1, Aaron Rodgers with the Achilles, changed the whole Jets franchise for the year. I mean, they were Super Bowl favorites. You got Kirk Cousins, torn Achilles as well. Joe Burrow, who is finally starting to get into his own again this year, and really I thought was going to end up with the MVP award, but injures his hand. You got Deshaun Watson out for the year. Anthony Richardson with the Colts, was really starting to find his rhythm with the Colts. And you got Justin Herbert, Derek Carr, who had an AC sprain, and then had a concussion, and then re-injured his shoulder, and then hurt his back. He's like the bionic man this year.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on. And then one I wanted to talk about, which, while we're on the topic of contenders and pretenders, the Philadelphia Eagles, because Jalen Hurts, I feel like, is a little bit more hurt than he's given off. I think there's a little something going on behind the scenes there, because he's not running as much, and he just does not look like himself out there. I mean, they're struggling. And speaking of, as you were saying, coaches getting a little too pretty with it, that's an example right there. The Eagles not balancing the run game. And you got fans going to their facility and holding up signs saying "run the ball," But there's a lot going on there with Philadelphia. Are you worried about them with the way they've been struggling as of late? Barely pulled one off in New York. How do you feel about them right now?
I follow the NFC East closely because my team is in the East, and I'm very familiar with the Eagles. I think the thing that is troubling about the Eagles this year is the main thing is a lack of identity. So last year, I mean, we can't live in the past, right? We can't live off of last year, but they had a lot of changes. They changed multiple coordinators. They had turnover in players, but they kept their core primarily the same. And from what I've seen, a couple things. Number one, defensively, they are not getting the pressure that they got last year. I mean, they got 70 plus sacks last year, which is ridiculous. I think 4 guys had over 10 sacks, just out of this world numbers. And they seem to have gotten older. Mm-hmm. They're young up front, with drafting the Georgia boys, bringing them in at D tackles.
Jalen Carter's been phenomenal.
Jalen Carter has been phenomenal. I think on the back end, Darius Slay is still a very good corner, but for whatever reason, I don't know if it's schematically, I don't know if it's a lack of trust in the system. I don't know what it is, but defensively, they have not been remotely the same, not even close. Last year, they were on a tear. And when you go to the offensive side of the ball, when you mention Jalen Hurts, if he's hurt, this is a part of the game, right? Mm-hmm. If you're hurt and you're out there, you got to produce. Mm-hmm. I believe that there's something wrong. He's too much of a gamer. I followed Jalen Hurts since high school. He's a Texas kid. Obviously went to Alabama, had a lot of success. Went to Oklahoma, had a lot of success. And when he got drafted by the Eagles, it was scary because you see a guy that has led and won at every level and came in last year and really just took off. So injuries could certainly play a role in it. I think their playbook schematically has been very boring. When you look at how other teams use their receivers, I mean, they got A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Goddard at tight end. And then they bring in a guy like Swift, who I know he's not LaShawn McCoy, but when I watch him run the ball, that's what he reminds me of. And a running back like that, you have to give touches, whether it be handoff, short pass, screen, whatever you need to do. He needs touches to get going.
Yeah.
And, Nick Sirianni, he got his team to the Super Bowl. Props to him. However, I think that I think that this year they came in a little high on themselves. I think the NFC, although you could say is a little down overall, I think it's top heavy. And I think Lions have gotten better. Obviously, the Cowboys are going to be there because they're a divisional opponent and they've built a really good team. The Niners proved that I believe that they're just, I think they're just on a higher level than the Eagles. And you've got the lower tier teams that are trying to come in. And if the Eagles aren't careful, I mean, every week you hear, oh, we need to get better. We need to get better. We're not doing this. We're not doing that. And at week 16, 17, that shouldn't be a conversation anymore. I don't pretend to know NFL level ball. But I know when I see a team that is lacking an identity when I see it.
Oh, absolutely. And you just see like they have no rhythm to them. They don't have that same juice that they had last year. Everything is just kind of like, oh, you think maybe they got it, and then it's just like another third down. They don't get. You see a lot of Jalen Hurts as soon as he gets the ball, which the Eagles are known for having one of the best lines, but he's getting the ball and immediately is just scrambling out of the pocket and trying to make something happen on the run or throw it away. He just looks a little antsy back there, and as you mentioned, I don't think enough is said about what head coaches and teams have to go through when having the success that they had last year and losing the coordinators. The offensive coordinator who went to Indianapolis, Shane Steichen, who I believe should be coach of the year for what he's done with that team, losing their quarterback. That's another story, but their defensive coordinator going to Arizona and coaching them. And you see teams like the Rams in 2018, they make a big run or explosive team, and they lose a lot of their coordinators, and as the years have gone on, they've lost coaches like Zach Taylor for the Bengals, Matt LaFleur for the Packers. It's huge losing those coordinators. The Niners lost Mike McDaniel, and he's having all that success in Miami. Speaking of changes this year, the Cowboys went through a change, losing their offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, to the Chargers. And Mike McCarthy now taking over play calling duties, having a little bit of success, but they've been struggling as of late. What do you think about them? Pretender or contender?
It's a tough one to answer. I think that there's a lot made of them not being able to win on the road. But I look at not so much wins and losses necessarily as how they played on the road. Because early on, they took some tail whippings, right? They went down to Arizona. Props to their coach. For Arizona for as bad as they are as a team overall, they've stuck in a lot of games with some really good teams. And I think that really speaks to the coaching job that they're doing down there. And this was happening before they got Kyler back.
And that's the Eagles D coordinator, so he's very familiar with that Cowboys team. Yeah,
exactly. So again, styles make fights. Familiarity with each other also contributes to those kind of things. But I believe that the type of year Dak is having, I believe that there was a huge conversation with Kellen Moore about balance, running the ball more, seeing Dak not have to throw the ball 40, 50 times.
Yeah.
And I think they've done a pretty good job of that. but they haven't been able to really get the run game going. Um, Looking at the dynamics of the team, uh, injuries on the O line have hampered them up and down all year. Tyron Smith, let me tell you something. We always talk about Trent Williams and the job he's done in San Francisco and how much he affects that team when he's out of the game. Let me tell you, Tyron Smith was the highest rated left tackle going into last week before he missed the game. And when you take him out of the game, I don't know if you watched the game, but I watched 3 or 4 plays where our left tackle did not block Chubb. He came running free. And I don't know that you blame that on coaching. I think the coaches have to put together a game plan. I know this because I coach. You put together a game plan, but the coaches can't play for you. You know, you got to get out there and execute the game plan. And I felt like, considering the fact that that left tackle's out, Zach Martin's hobbled, all-pro, Hall of Fame right guard, you start seeing how those kind of injuries impact the team. So to answer your question, if you take some of those key O-linemen off of Dallas, because I don't believe we have the O-line depth, I think that they're in trouble come playoff time. If they get healthy, I think that they can make it maybe potentially to the NFC Championship game, because I don't believe that the Lions, for all the great that they've done this year, I don't even believe that the Eagles could beat them, whether it be Cowboys at home or on the road going to Philly to play them. The only team I see that they struggle with would be the Niners. Stylistically, they're just more physical. McCarthy would have to coach a hell of a game, and the Cowboys would have to play their best game and maybe catch the Niners on an off day, I think, to catch them and beat them in a game.
No, I completely agree with you. And a lot is to be said about a healthy O-line, especially at a time where often Super Bowl is decided by who's the healthiest,
Yes.
Come playoff time. And not enough is said about O-line health and the consistency it takes to really get a rhythm for those guys, to communicate on the line, who's taking who. And they've had issues with Tyron Smith staying healthy, Zach Martin, who's been one of the best linemen in the league for a decade now. And they need health. And as you had mentioned, it really comes down, I believe, to matchups. Dak has gone so much better as the years progressed, and so much better from last year. His footwork has improved tremendously. So I have a lot more confidence in him as a quarterback to lead them and take them far. But the road to the playoffs, I think it's going to depend on their matchup. I think they can beat Philly either in Philly or in Dallas. I think Philly's got too many things going on behind the scenes. I think Dallas matches up well with them, their divisional opponent. Even when they played them in Philly earlier in the year, that was the Cowboys' game to lose.
100%.
And the Eagles, you saw they had a lot of games early this year where they were barely squeaking out of wins, and now you see it's coming back to bite them. They're not pulling those out. And if Dallas can see them, they got a shot. I think they match up very well with the Rams. You saw earlier in the year, because they will have home field if they play the Rams. They will match up very well with them on turf in Dallas, and I just think, as you said, the 49ers would be the toughest challenge for them, and it'd be very tough to see them getting over that hump and beating them.
Hey, that's why they play the playoff games, though, right? We'll see how it plays out. But I do have a question for you, because you did bring up Kellen Moore and that whole situation leaving Dallas. What do you think of that situation down in, I always say San Diego. Sorry, I always say it. It's kind of like inbred in me. I feel like I should continue to say it. But they're in LA now. What do you think of that situation there with Kellen Moore? Because I know they had a couple of injuries, but they brought him in to really, light fire to an offense that has a ton of talent. And Justin Herbert didn't go out until a week ago, 2 weeks ago. So they've been out of the playoff picture for weeks now. What do you think of that team and kind of what happened with them this year?
No, absolutely. And with them, it's a multitude of reasons. You can go down the list with them. The first off, I think it's their coach lost them.
Yeah.
Coach Staley, he definitely lost the locker room, and probably lost him a long time ago. But they have so much talent; they've been squeaking by. But
Yeah.
a lot of people were calling for him to be fired after the playoff loss last year to Jacksonville. Yeah, and I can
I
agree with that.
was.
It's
My
very
God.
it's very tough to see such a talented team, especially a franchise quarterback, and struggle the way they have. I mean, they blew that game against Jacksonville last year in the playoffs. And what really frustrated me about him is the week prior, week 17 last year. No, it was week 18, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
They had already clinched their spot. They couldn't move up or down in the playoffs. And he decided to go out there and play all their guys. And he stood by that decision, which I never understood, but he plays Mike Williams, their top receiver that year.
He got
And
hurt.
he's already banged up, and then he gets hurt and misses the playoffs. And that is huge. Decisions like that. And all you have to do is say, hey, I messed up there, and take some accountability. But he had refused to do that. And you can see he lost the locker room, and they've had issues with health as well. I mean, Mike Williams out for the year early this year. Keenan Allen, you see him starting to feel a little bit more banged up due to more usage. And over the years, he's had issues staying healthy. I
Yeah.
mean, they've just had a lot. And I think it all really comes down to just the coaching. Staley had lost that. And it was frustrating to see him go from coaching the Rams, the Super Bowl year, number one, the year prior, actually, he had the number one defense in the league. And he goes over to LA, the Chargers, and has all the talent in the world on defense. And they
Oh
had
my gosh.
continually one of the worst defenses in the league. And that
Oh
was
my gosh.
very frustrating to see. And the rumor is if the Patriots let go of Belichick, the rumor is he might come on over there. And I think that would be the best spot for him.
Woo! I tell you what, with that, I mean, at each level, I feel like they have a player that's very talented. Their back end is very solid. I mean, Khalil Mack's still in the top three in the sacks right now. Bosa's just hurt, or has been hurt quite a bit over the last couple of years. But to your point, that he did lose the locker room when you take a team that has that much talent defensively, and that's your staple. That's what you got the job for. And then you bring in a Kellen Moore who, for all accounts, I think did the best that they could this year, considering the defense couldn't they couldn't stop anyone. Um, and yeah, Brandon Staley, for all of his arrogance, it appeared, never really took ownership of any of the faults that were happening with the team. And I think if you ever watch the dynamics of a locker room, when the coach is very staunch in where they stand on decisions, and most people would disagree with that decision, including the players, I think that you lose the locker room when you don't take ownership and accountability for where the team is at that time. And you brought up last year. I mean, I'd almost forgotten about that, but that was crazy because, I mean, that playoff game, that was inexcusable. I don't know how he kept his job based on that, but they got him out of there this year. I don't know what's going to happen with Kellen. Maybe they give him a shot at head coach. I don't know. But I do believe that Belichick would be probably the best fit to go over there and take over a young team that has a lot of talent.
Oh, yeah. And, he would already have it all in place there. They just need a coach. They got all the talent in the world. You got a franchise quarterback. I don't know what else you could ask for in a situation like that. But, yeah, the whole accountability thing, you see a coach that has really been known for it this year is Mike McDaniel of the Dolphins. And it shows a lot, the way the players follow him. Tua looks like a completely different quarterback since McDaniel took over. And the relationship that they have, it's very important. You see these quarterback coach relationships is huge.
Yes.
Instilling your young quarterback with confidence. And that's where I think the Los Angeles Rams have went wrong with Jared Goff. You kind of see that relationship broken apart as the years had progressed. McVay put a lot of pressure on Goff. Ended up trading for Matthew Stafford, get a Super Bowl.
Yep.
And I wanted to bring this up, but the Detroit Lions, they trade for Jared Goff. Brad Holmes had come over there from the Rams. Round of applause for them.
Mad props.
Brad Holmes from the Rams comes over there to be vice president. brings in Jared Goff. First year, they start off, I think, 1-8, and they end up 3-14, and then they go last year 1-6, and end up finishing up 9-8, barely missing the playoffs.
Strong year.
This year already playoff contenders. And a few years ago when they hired Dan Campbell, I was looking at this the other day, a tweet resurfaced of Colin Cowherd making fun of their head coach Dan Campbell and how just inspirational he was and fired up about joining the team. Colin Cowherd called him Fred Flintstone. And it's very laughable to look at now they're division winners for the first time since 93. How about that?
I'm thoroughly impressed with the job that Dan Campbell's done. I think, like you said, it starts from above with ownership, general management, hiring the right coach. And for all accounts, it seems like Dan Campbell's very good about delegation and knowing where his strengths are to be able to motivate his team. He's no nonsense, very old school. It's crazy. I hear even at the lowest levels, Pop Warner, junior high school, college, you hear people say that you can't be old school coach anymore because of the way society and culture and how sports are now. But I would say contrary, because I would strongly disagree with that, because you see a lot of coaches in the league, even at the college and even at the high school levels, you see these coaches that are no nonsense. But I like to attribute it to them being very stern but fair, right? It's like a good parent, somebody that recognizes, how to communicate with your players on the individual level. And they've shown through their actions that they trust Jared Goff in the big moments, but they also show and say, okay, if they see him, teetering, they know that they could lean on a run game at times, go back to the play action pass. And their defense has improved drastically from last year. That was their biggest issue last year. They could score, but they could not stop anybody. But yeah, no, I'm thoroughly impressed. Do they win a playoff game? Depends on the matchup. But I do believe that the Lions are here to stay for a while, just because of the influx with the Packers. Don't really know what they've got there. The Bears, I don't know. I think Justin Fields has a lot of talent. And they can't say that they didn't give him some help with the DJ Moore coming over there this year. And then, of course, the Vikings, Kirk Cousins, I think he might be done there. Yeah, I think he might be done there. So, yeah, the Lions, props to them. Amazing job by Dan Campbell. Oh, and another thing on the Lions front, they've drafted extremely well.
That's Brad Holmes.
Very well.
Done a very good job. I mean, you look at guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta this year, Amon-Ra St. Brown, all from Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. And I just got to say, Dan Campbell, I've never even met the guy a day in my life. And just seeing his post-game pressers, I want to run through a brick wall for that man.
I would love to play for him. Yeah. I would love to play for him. I would love to coach with him. Like those jokes, making fun of a guy, Colin Cowherd, he does it for the ratings.
Yeah.
But he'll never go back and say, oh, I made a mistake. Right. But yeah, no, I love Dan Campbell. I love him.
For a city like Detroit to really embrace him, and they absolutely needed him.
Oh, yeah.
Because all the issues and the struggling they've had in the past, I mean, they've had a great quarterback, Stafford, and obviously everyone over there feels disappointed that they weren't able to get a team around him in that time span. And the talk of the town is that the Rams may be lined up to play the Lions come first round of the playoffs. So will the Lions?
Be a fun one.
Yeah, the Lions. A lot of people are saying they're not quite that tier 1, but they're high level of tier 2. That's the argument. People are saying they're not sure if they want to put them in the same combo as the Niners and the Ravens, but they continue to show they're a good football team. I think this week against Dallas is going to be a huge indicator of that.
Big game.
They go into Dallas, but what do you think about Stafford coming in Detroit for their first playoff game?
Man, the NFL is very good about storylines, aren't they?
It's almost like
I
a
almost,
scripted.
it's the weirdest thing that these matchups play out the way that they do
Yeah.
sometimes. But as far as that dynamic and that matchup, I have to say the Rams have really flipped it. He got hurt. Matthew Stafford got hurt against the Cowboys in their matchup. They went on a bye, and since then they've come back and have been on a tear. You know, you see these commentators on these different channels calling the Rams like a tomato can. They called a couple other teams just not very good teams. And what you don't realize is those teams you have to play out the whole year. You never know how this thing shakes out. At the beginning of the year, who would have told you that the Eagles would drop 3 straight games,
Yeah.
right? How many people would say that the 49ers would have dropped 3 straight, right? So it's just the ebbs and flows of the season. But I would love to see it. I think Matthew Stafford did a lot of great things in Detroit. Unfortunately, it just didn't play and the cards didn't play well for him to have success in the playoffs there. And they put a hell of a team together for him in Los Angeles with the Rams to go to the playoffs and win the Super Bowl. But I think that if that plays out that way, that might be the most interesting first round playoff matchup maybe in the NFL, just because of some of the dynamics and the players that have played against each other, former teams, and all that stuff. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at the Rams' really resurgence this year. Sean McVay spoke about it before the season has started. This team reminds him a lot of the 2017 team, the year before the Super Bowl, where he takes over. Very young team. They like to be coached. They're a fun, energetic team, and they're just a year away. The Rams, I don't know if they'd be able to go in Detroit and beat a team like them, but both teams look to be a year away. That game could be a toss-up. Maybe Matthew Stafford's experience plays a big factor in there. But Goff, people forget, he's been to a Super Bowl as well. He's played deep in the playoffs. It'd be a very interesting matchup. And one more thing I wanted to mention, speaking of, exciting possible first-round matchups, how about Chiefs and the Bills? I mean, the Chiefs and the Bills, as the Bills have got going lately, beat the Chiefs recently. And, Josh Allen hasn't been able to beat him yet in the playoffs, Pat Mahomes, but maybe this is a year with them getting going.
Yeah, the Bills, since they fired their offensive coordinator, have turned a new leaf. I think that they're leaning on the running game more. They found ways to get Cook more involved in their offense. And it's not just running the ball. They throw passes to him out of the backfield, screen plays, quick passes to get it out of Josh Allen's hands so he's not holding on to it. Josh Allen is literally, to me, when I watch him play, he's just, I know it's like the most cliche comparison, but he's Big Ben, but can move. And, he's got the arm talent. He can make every throw. His decision-making earlier on in the season, I felt like he was pressing, trying to do too much. And I mean, he's the franchise guy. Talent-wise, he's probably in the top 3 in the league. And he's turned it around. I mean, I'll say right now, Lamar Jackson's number 1 just based on his team's success. But if Josh Allen keeps winning games, I think he's over 40 touchdowns for the year in total. He keeps playing like this, he can throw his name in there too, because he just won against the Chiefs, had a game, dominated the Cowboys. Had a rough outing this past week, not necessarily as dominant, but if they go ahead and get into the playoffs, I think that he deserves to throw his hat in the ring for sure.
Yeah, and you look at them, I mean, Josh Allen, the turnovers early in the year, the Bills in general really struggling, and the way they've just found a way to find a new identity this year and adjust on the fly and really overcome those struggles, the bumps and bruises, to now really, find a rhythm. And that's huge, getting hot right now with the Bills having the quarterback that they do. If their defense can get going and stay healthy, they've had a lot of health issues every year around playoff time. But, if they can get going, they could really be the boogeyman of the AFC, make a run. Kind of does seem a little wide open, depending on who you match up with late in the playoffs. You never know.
For sure. For sure.
But, that's all the time we have for today. I appreciate you. And we're definitely going to have you on again real soon.
100%. Look forward to it.
Awesome. Thank you. And that's it for today's Playbook on the Boise Beat. We hope you had a good time with me and David today, breaking down Week 16 possible playoff scenarios. And we look forward to seeing more of you as we go on.